Thanks so much for having me, guys. So I wanted to start off this presentation with this picture. It's when I first became paralyzed in my arms, and I'm standing on FDR's area on Roosevelt Island. And FDR was another leader in the disability space. But really, what I owe my success to is Marion and my family that's sitting in the second row. I never thought that, I would be where I am today, and it really is because of the girls in my class. I had such a special class of kind, generous, and fun women that I got to spend, 4 years with. So when I think about some guiding quotes in my life, one that I really learned at Marion was, be the change that you want to see in the world. So about 12 years ago, I was working in New York City, my first job, living alone, and my arms started to not work, which is kind of weird. I thought maybe, just stress from a big job, I slept on my arm, and then as time went on, one finger after another became paralyzed. And to this day, they still don't exactly know why. They think it might be motor neuron disease, which is possibly like an ALS or as a car accident. They're not exactly sure. So I had to figure out, how do I get around a world that wasn't made with me in mind? And I thought about really a new way of thinking about the world and about disability. And disability is a function of the mismatch between a person's abilities and the demands of the environment. Because I only feel disabled when I can't do something. And I realized that the physical world wasn't designed with disability in mind, but every single person becomes disabled at some point in their life. So why is this mismatch happening? Because, you can have a permanent disability like me. You can have a temporary disability like, my dad's shoulder isn't very good. Or you can be a new parent holding a baby in your arms, which I will be in 2 weeks to a girl. So we have to really rethink disability, and I needed to play a part in it because I wanted to be the change that I needed in the world. So I looked into design because I'm disabled by design. But design can be the great equalizer. So I switched careers and got into inclusive design. So what's inclusive design? It's kind of a new topic. They teach it a little bit at design schools, but it's been really popular for the last 20 years. Some examples of inclusive design are, okay, so does anyone use an assistive device in this room? So no one has a smartphone. So the touchscreen was created by a professor at University of Delaware, so not too far from us. And he was getting carpal tunnel syndrome in his hands. But he was an engineer, so he needed to figure something out. He created the touchscreen and sold it to Apple. Let's say he does no longer live in Delaware because he's a multi-millionaire. And some other great things that were created through inclusive design were the typewriter, curb cuts, voice activation, so you can thank Alexa for that, self-driving cars. So when you think about design for people with disabilities, it leads to innovation. So inclusive design can be applied wherever. Because when we think about who's a designer, it's somebody who makes a decision that affects someone else. So we're all really designers here because our decisions affect someone else. And the first thing when you make a decision, you have to recognize kind of where are your biases, where are they sitting in your decision making? And how does my identity affect my decision making? And I think that's a big question to ask before you do something that's going to affect somebody, because inherently, consciously or unconsciously, your biases are going to show into your actions. And learn from diversity. It's really interesting going and living in New York for 11 years and meeting other kids that grew up in the Main Line or in Delaware County or Montgomery County. And they're very different from the girls that I meet at Marion. There's just this sense of diversity that Marion had. There was a lot of families where parents were just, working really hard to keep their kids in Marion. And that diversity really helped me at my job to understand where my biases might sit. So really try to spend as much time as you can with people different than you, because you want to make sure that you understand where their practices sit and their customs sit within their lives, because that would affect how you make your decision. And then solve for one, extend to all, or use technology to create multiple configurations. Think about when you're either making that decision or producing that product, how can I make multiple versions that will work for somebody? Something that's really interesting is if you ever look and do a Zoom call, and you can always notice that in the background, if you blur the background, it kind of cuts you out. So if you also think about, skin tone, it wasn't working with darker skin tones because they didn't think about it, because it was created by a bunch of light skin coders. So ensuring that when you're thinking about what you're going to produce, how it works with different skin tones, different races, different ethnicities, so that it's appropriate and works for all. So how do I put that into a process? So this is what they use at Stanford Design Lab, and I use this one kind of the making process. So really, I focus a lot on product design and software design. And my team and myself go through this entire process for each thing that we create. We first start off with noticing where your biases come, having empathy, understanding other cultures. Then define, okay, if we're gonna create something, what are the restraints that we'll have? And then we ideate. And there's a great innovation room that I just saw here, so there's gonna be lots of ideating done here. And then you prototype, things with 3D printing, just different mock-ups, so that you're not bringing something to market that isn't 100%. You want to try things out. And then you test, and then you reflect on that, and you test it out to make sure that it works for different communities. So this process I've used in a few cool projects that I want to share with you. As you mentioned, I spent my last probably 10 years on and off at one of the world's largest branding agencies. So we created one out of every brand experience that you've ever had with a brand, from a website to a Super Bowl commercial to a billboard. And what I wanted to do there is, when I became disabled, I said, well, why does everybody think that, my life is over, I'm gonna move back in with my parents? Why is this? And I thought, okay, wow, because disabled people aren't seen in brand experiences. So they just think we go away somewhere and that's it. So that's why I joined branding and advertising, so that I could change the messaging myself. So one of my first projects, which was really fun, was with Tommy Hilfiger. And we created the world's first adaptive fashion line. So when we talk about adaptive fashion, I mean, maybe Katie Falzone would probably know what it is because she's an OTPT, but adaptive fashion is looking at buttons and saying, why are buttons not changed forever? Why aren't they magnets? Why are they so hard? Asking those type of questions. So we created products that were from Tommy Hilfiger's fashion line that had magnetic buttons. And then we ideated on more and more, and came, probably they have 100 pieces now of the line. So I want to show you a really quick 2-minute video of how that process worked.
We're the most minority in the world, yet we're not put into any conversation.
I learned through having children with special needs that autistic children sometimes don't necessarily have the dexterity to button buttons and zippers. Adaptive clothing for people with disabilities. It had never been done before. So I said, we have to do it.
We wanted to make sure we did this properly. So we need an innovative, creative partner to help us make this happen.
Our role as the agency working with Tommy Hilfiger was to help develop, design, and co-create an entirely new product range for people with disabilities. This is how Tommy Adaptive was born. Our inclusive philosophy led us to first create a platform to work with over 1,500 people from the disability community from all over the world.
Through this design process, together we have created and launched 7 new clothing innovations.
But to be truly inclusive, we had to go beyond the product. So we worked with Amazon to create the first accessible shopping skill for Alexa.
Select option 1. Action.
Our entire design process was inclusive, from our legally blind director to the cast, crew, and influencers. And every piece of marketing was made accessible with descriptive audio and closed captioning.
And the response from our audience has been incredibly positive.
These are going to be life-changing jeans.
The access to fashion and the empowerment and self-esteem that it brings should be considered a human right.
So it's still going on to this day, and we have, it's a profitable line. And I think really showing that when you include people with disabilities, there's such a large part of the demographics that if you include them as an actual customer, you can make money too. And that's why I've really focused on the business side. And then we'll talk a little bit about Open Style Lab. So Open Style Lab is really amazing. It was started by 2 women at MIT. And what it does is it brings function and fashion together. And I started kind of my work in fashion because disability has an image problem, which is strange, but it does. And if you put it with something that's cool like fashion, people start to think about disability a little bit differently. And what we've used here is we take this process of cross-collaboration learning. So it's engineers, therapists, and fashion designers, and you put them together, and that creates innovation. And from there, that really wasn't being done. People kind of in fashion stay in their lanes. You have your textiles people, your fitting people, you have your marketing people, never really work together. But we knew we had to. And so from there, I'm going to show you a video a little later on about Open Style Lab, but we've created over 100 different customized outfits from a man who has multiple sclerosis and can no longer really speak at a loud volume, and his tie has a hidden microphone in it, which is really, really fun. And he won at the Sundance Film Festival, so he really needed to be able to use his voice and have a nice tie. Other things that we've worked on is we created a clothing line that inflates on your body. So, one of the biggest ways elderly people hurt themselves is they fall trying to get dressed. So you now can stand into a pair of pants and it floats up on you. Those are probably like my 2 favorite ones. They create a coat for me that I can put on without the use of my arms. So many fun technologies that also interact with fashion, and they make it beautiful. So I'm going to go into kind of what I'm doing at Microsoft. So I've only been there for about a month and a half, but I've been working with them through my work at Wunderman Thompson. And some fun projects I got to work on. One that just launched about 6 months ago was the Adaptive Surface Kit. So this kit you'll see right here, and it's really cheap, not expensive at all, because the one thing with adaptive products is you want to keep them at the same price, because why would you charge more for someone who's disabled? You'll see here on the keyboard, so if you're blind, how do you use a computer? How do you identify what the keys are? So you can put tactile markers on the keys so you can identify what they are. But, if your eyes don't work as well, and you're just getting older, it allows you to see these small little icons by feeling it. Or things like, it's really hard to get the laptop top open. So we've added a little hook on there that you can put at any part of the laptop. So really thinking about easy ways you can make these, tasks you do every day, like using a laptop, easier. So it was a really fun project that we did. Another really cool project, I'm not sure, this was on the Super Bowl probably 3 years ago. This was the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And I'll show you a little bit about this in this video.
My name is Grover.
Sean, my name is Ian.
I'm Taylor. My name is Owen, and I'm 9.5 years old. I only have one. And yeah. I love video games, my friends, my family, and again video games.
Happy. The fun that you get to have with connecting with your friends.
Do you make your own rules?
It's his way of interacting with his friends when he can't physically otherwise do it.
When I'm playing with a regular controller, there's some things that don't work for me. It's difficult for me to use both joysticks and the D-pad at the exact same time.
And it just slowed me down a bunch more while other people were like,
She's never had the freedom to play at the level she knows she could.
I never thought it was unfair. I just thought, hey, this is the way it is and it's not going to change. What I like about the adaptive controller is that now everyone can play. I don't even have to look at the controller and just like looking at the screen like, hey, yeah.
You never want your kid to feel like an outsider or an other.
One of the biggest fears early on is, how will Owen be viewed by the other kids? He's not different when he plays.
It's a little challenging, but that's the whole point of gaming. I can hit the buttons just as fast as they can. And I think I can crush my friends. No matter how your body is or how fast you are, you can play. It's a really good thing to have in this world.
And I really enjoyed this because I didn't realize how big gaming was with teenagers and kids until I worked on this project. And just so that they could talk to their friends and make it much easier was a huge part of the kids' lives, and they were extremely appreciative, and they took place in the making of it. So it was very much not, okay, we're making this for you, you're making it with us, and made the disabled gamers a part of the creation itself. Okay, so another cool thing that I am working on is the Metaverse. So, as you guys have heard that term a lot and be like, I don't know what that is. So I thought I'd do a quick, brief 2-minute video on the Metaverse. What I'm particularly doing in the Metaverse is I'm making sure that it has safety restrictions, it's ethical, and it works for people with disabilities. Because if we're going to all live in the Metaverse, like Mark Zuckerberg says, I want that new world to be accessible. Because I was born into the physical world where nothing's accessible, not even doors to get clothing on. There's, accessibility is a big challenge. So if we're building this new world called the Metaverse, I needed to be a part of it. So that's why I took a new job, 7 months pregnant. I'm not crazy, but knowing I'm gonna have a girl, I knew that I wanted her to live in a Metaverse that was accessible and inclusive and safe. And I think here what's going to be great is that there are people looking out for that. And to not be scared of the internet and the Metaverse, to know that Microsoft is putting a lot of time and effort into this to make sure it's a safe environment as we live in kind of this hybrid Metaverse, real world life.
Metaverse. You've probably started to hear this word being thrown around lately. If you're lost, you're in the right place. Here we'll try to answer some big questions from Microsoft's point of view. What is a metaverse? Does it already exist? And are you already in it? Let's dig in. Simply put, a metaverse is a digital space inhabited by digital representations of people, places, and things. Think of it like a new version, or maybe a new vision of the internet. Many people talk about the internet as a place. Now we can actually go into that place to communicate, share, and work with others. It's an internet that you can actually interact with, like we do in the physical world. And it's not just a vision anymore. Right now, you can go to a concert and experience a show with other real people inside a video game. You can walk a factory floor from your own home. You can join a meeting remotely, but be in the room to collaborate with your coworkers. Those are metaverses, and the future is already here. Now, I can already hear some skepticism, but But an avatar of me isn't me. My digital self is not my physical self. Microsoft is working to help you better represent your whole self in the digital space, while also ensuring that you can bring your humanity and your agency over that representation with you. If the past few years have taught us anything, it's that we need that flexibility. The world has never been more connected, but lately, we've often needed to distance ourselves physically. The closer we can reflect our physical selves in the digital realm, the more these barriers we can break down. Teammates can join meetings from anywhere. Real-time translation allows people from diverse cultures to collaborate in real time. This is what takes this from a cool idea to a critical one. The Metaverse has the ability to stretch us beyond the barriers and limitations of the physical world.
So we'll show you one more really interesting video that I've worked on, and it's the work from Open Style Lab. What we kind of see here is, we just talked about how important digital is. This is how important physical accessibility is. That's our workshop.
Open Style Lab is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness for accessible clothing and style. And some of the ways that we do this is to offer research as well as a 10-week intensive summer program called the Parsons School of Design. This year we have 4 clients with a disability as well as 12 fellows from diverse backgrounds in design, occupational therapy, and engineering. So they've come all the way from the nation to join us for 10 weeks to co-create and to think about what it means to have accessible clothing, as well as looking at what inclusive design means for the future.
When you're working with clients with disabilities, it's important to not just think about the clothing, the adaptive clothing that you're making for them, but how they're going to use that adaptive clothing every single day and what they're going to encounter throughout their day.
I'm here to help the client really have a personalized garment, a wearable.
Our client Marcy wants a jumpsuit that wraps in the front.
We realize that there are a lot of challenges regarding commuting as a wheeler, as she says. And I guess we're going to be trying to tackle how she commutes and how we can improve that experience for her.
And what's crazy, April, one of the fellows in the program, there's no raincoat for her because with her wheelchair, she needs to have her arms accessible and the coat actually covers the wheels. So she would wear a plastic bag. And people, when she'd have her coffee cup out, they'd put change in it because they thought she was homeless. She's a professor, much smarter than I, and much chicer than I, but she had to resort to that because there wasn't stylish options. And that's why, the work in fashion and technology that I do means so much because it provides equity, and that's key for the disability community. So if you want to learn more about, inclusive design, I recommend these following readings. Read Mismatch by Kat Holmes. She is my mentor. She's a real big leader in inclusive design, and I suggest that. You can follow me on social, Christina Disarmed, or on Twitter. You can read Open Style Lab has amazing journals that talk about inclusive design. Or you could go to the toolkit that I worked on for Microsoft.com/design/inclusive. And you can always just reach out to me. I owe Marion for a lot of my success and also my family. And anything I can do to give back would mean a lot. So I know we have a few more minutes. If anybody has any questions or wants to come up and chat after the talk, feel free to. And thank you so much for your time. questions? Okay, over there in the back, black shirt.
It's really not a question. It's just really, I just want to say thank you so much, and hi to Judge Mallon, Mary, and Grace. I didn't get the connection before. Yeah, but you know, I just, you know, we just so totally appreciate what you're doing, and the idea, it's heartwarming. But with the inclusiveness, and for me, I do a lot more work around policy and those kinds of things, and thinking about, you know, as you're talking about like the biases that you have, and bringing the right people into the room as you're making decisions, and thinking about it broadly. So while so much of what you're doing is the physical world, but like how important it is, which you know, you know, just over everything. So thank you so much. It's just great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think in the policy is what makes, you know, the biggest difference. I think where I saw is I couldn't be as effective in policy because I didn't have the background. And then, you know, what we do is a lot of these brands can push policy, which has been really, really helpful. I worked on a project for no hair discrimination by Dove because women of color were getting discriminated at job interviews based off of their type of hair. So Dove pushed that, and then they're going by Unilever, which pushed the government, and they just passed that act last week. So it's a big connection, and we can make a change of policy if we make change of plans. Anything else?
My daughter's a junior here, and we're in colleges and all. I'm just curious, so when you were here, what kind of student were you, and then where did you go? To
Yeah,
school? What did you
totally.
so inspiring.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
so when I was younger, I would say before marrying, I wasn't really into schooling. I was into cheerleading, boys, and fashion. So one stayed, which was fashion. And then I got to marry it. And then I realized that, oh my God, actually, academics is really important. And you can be cool as a girl and be smart because that was all my classmates. So I really then focused on academics and had support, you know, from Pat Zach and the rest of my teachers to find how someone with ADHD that I have can be successful, just have to learn a little bit differently. And then, you know, really knew that I wanted to do marketing, went to St. Joe's, and then landed doing work on CoverGirl cosmetics branding in New York, and then saw that how important it was to infuse inclusion in beauty and fashion. So it was not the most, you know, normal path, but I think, you know, always knew that branding and brand association was really important because that's how people saw the world. But if she ever wants to do anything like that, tell her to reach out to me because I love mentoring, and I think girls are the ones that are going to change this, and we have to change it quickly. Anybody else? Oh, hey, Kate.
So I know your wedding, you had a bunch of inclusive vendors,
yeah.
And in that commercial, the same thing happened. So I'm just wondering, if we're trying to do it on a smaller scale, how can we search for that on the internet to make sure that we are opening our doors to everybody?
Yeah, there is a website called disabledcreatives.com where they have creatives with disabilities. Also, if you want to hire people with disabilities for your businesses, I'm on the board of a company called Inclusively, which uses technology to match accommodations that people would need at their jobs with their disability needs, and sets the companies up for success if they want to hire them. So that's more at a larger scale, but at a smaller scale, disabled creatives are really great. And if you do have something, I have lots of disabled vendors from wanting to make my wedding inclusive as possible. Just reach out to me and I can get you somebody. Because I know chefs to makeup artists. My makeup artist did my makeup with her feet and her mouth, to dress designers. So whatever you need, just reach out. Well, thank you so much for your time.